Hello, this is Pastor Stephen Anderson from Faithful Word Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona, here to teach you the Greek alphabet, which is going to be the first step in learning how to speak and read Greek. Now, Greek has a completely different alphabet from English, but the good news is that Greek is a very phonetic language, meaning that once you learn the alphabet, things are going to be spelled exactly how they sound. And so once you memorize these 24 letters, it's going to be pretty easy for you to read Greek. It's not really that hard at all. Now, the pronunciation that I'm going to be teaching you is modern Greek pronunciation. Obviously, the Bible is not written in modern Greek. It's written in an older dialect known as Koine Greek. But that being said, it's not so different that you cannot communicate with modern Greek speakers using Koine Greek and be understood. They are different dialects, but they are the same language, and they are very similar, in fact. They have differences, but they also have a lot of similarities. And so it would make more sense, if you're going to learn biblical Greek, to learn the modern pronunciation, because that will allow you to communicate with modern-day Greek speakers. But let's get started with the alphabet. The first letter of the Greek alphabet is the letter alpha. And basically, it's made by taking your pen and starting at the top, at this little line right here, and then you come around and make a loop, and then just like that. Now, the best way to learn the alphabet is to grab a piece of paper and a pen as you're watching this video and actually just write out a row of 20 of each letter. As I'm explaining these to you and talking to you about the letters, just write them down. That's the best way to learn it. Okay, this letter is called alpha, and alpha makes an ah sound, okay? So after the letter alpha is going to be the letter vita. Vita. And of course, if you're used to the Americanized pronunciation or the reconstructed pronunciation, you would know this as beta. But it's actually pronounced vita, and it makes a V sound, like a V. And vita is basically just like a capital B, but it has this little tail going down below it. Vita. So it goes alpha, vita. And then the third letter is going to be gamma. Gamma. And gamma is similar to a lowercase English y, but it's got that little loop, and it's basically symmetrical from one side to the other. So this is the letter gamma. So alpha, vita, gamma. And then after gamma is delta. Now delta looks similar to an English D, but it has this curvy thing going on. To me, it kind of looks like one of those bombs, you know, the little black round bomb with the wick coming out of it. So this letter is delta, and it is basically pronounced like the TH in the word the. Okay, if you speak Spanish, you're probably used to pronouncing the D's in this way. But this is delta, delta. So alpha, vita, gamma, delta. All right, and then after delta, we've got epsilon. And epsilon looks very similar to an English E, just two little loops like that. That's the lowercase epsilon. And epsilon makes the eh sound. Now remember, the Greek alphabet, the first sound of the name of the letter tells you what sound that letter makes. So alpha says a, vita says v, gamma says g, delta says th, and then epsilon says e, epsilon. Now, the good thing about these vowels is that they only make one sound. Now, we'll talk a little bit later about combining vowels into diphthongs, but epsilon basically just makes one type of a sound. It's not like in English where we have these dramatically different sounds, E, A. It just makes an E as an epsilon. Sometimes it'll be longer, like A. I mean, but it's not that big of a difference. So, after epsilon is the letter zeta. And zeta has a little loop thing at the top, and then it swings out like that and comes back. So it kind of looks like a C, but it's got these other decorations on it. So again, the zeta, you just start at the top, make a little loop, and then make a big giant loop, and then come back like that. That is zeta, okay? Then after zeta, you have the letter eta. Now, eta is basically like an English lowercase n, but then the front just comes down a little bit further, okay? So it's like you're writing an English lowercase n, but then you just come down a little bit further. This letter is pronounced eta. So we have zeta, and then we have ita. Zita says z, and ita makes an e sound. This is a vowel that makes an e sound, ita. And then after ita, you have theta. Theta is basically just an oval with a line across it. And you probably remember this from math. In math, you called this theta, using an American pronunciation. But this letter in Greek is the letter theta, and it makes a th sound. Now, the difference between this and delta is that delta makes the th sound like in the word the, delta. Whereas theta makes the sound as in the word thick, the harder th sound, thick, theta, all right? Then after theta, you have the letter iota, which iota is just like a lowercase I that you don't dot. Okay, that's iota. Just like an English lowercase I, except you're not going to be dotting it. You just make a line like that, lowercase. That's iota. And then after iota, you have kappa. Now, the lowercase kappa basically looks like you took an English capital K and just shrunk it down. Okay, and I hope you're writing these down as we go and practicing these. But it basically is just like the uppercase K in English, except you're just writing it like half the height because it's lowercase. So this is kappa, all right? And then after kappa, you have the letter lambda. And lambda basically looks like this. So it curves down, and then it has these two legs at the bottom. And then after lambda, we have the letter mi, mi. Now, mi basically looks like a lowercase u in English, but then it just has this extra long leg at the front added on, okay? So basically, you start out by making a straight line like that, and then you just kind of turn it into a little lowercase u alongside of it. And that is the letter mi. Now, if you look really closely at this letter, it sort of resembles an M in a way. When you look at it, it's just kind of a warped M. But the way that I like to remember it is just as a lowercase u with this other extra long leg on the left side, and this letter is called mi, all right? Now, the next letter is pretty tricky. It is called ni, okay? So we have mi and ni. Ni looks just like an English lowercase v, okay? So when you're reading something in Greek and you see this letter, you're going to want to pronounce it like a V sound. But it doesn't make a V sound, it makes an N sound. This is ni, ni. So you got to get used to pronouncing this as an N, ni. This letter makes ni. After mi and ni, we have xi. Xi is basically the X sound. And this one, you start out with a little loop at the top, then you make two big loops, and then you come back like this. So it's almost like a backwards 3, okay? But it has some other little frills going on here. So it does resemble a backwards 3. So you start out by making a little loop at the top, and then you loop down, and then another loop in the middle, and then you come back at the bottom. Now, this letter was actually pretty easy for me to learn because when I was a child and we did cursive handwriting in elementary school, this is what they taught us as an uppercase X, okay? I know I've talked to other people who learned a different uppercase X when they were doing English cursive handwriting, but for some reason this is what they taught us, so this was pretty easy for me to learn because I learned it as a child in school. But anyway, this is xi. Xi makes the X sound. So we have mi, ni, xi. The next letter is omicron. Omicron is identical to our English lowercase o, and it makes an O sound, omicron. Now, where omicron gets its name is O, obviously, and then mikron. Mikron means small in Greek. So this is basically a little o, omicron, omicron, okay? Now, you've probably heard of the last letter of the Greek alphabet, which is omega. Well, mega means big or large. So basically what you have in Greek is the little o, omicron, and the big O, omega, okay? And they both make the same sound in modern Greek, which is an O sound, okay? So this is omicron, just like a lowercase o. After omicron, we have the letter P. You probably, again, learned this in math as pi, but in Greek it's pronounced P, okay? Let me draw it for you nice and big here. P, okay? The next letter is called Rho. I am unable to roll my R's, so I just say Rho. I can't really do a fancy sounding R. But the Rho is a little bit tricky because it looks an awful lot like a lowercase p in English, right? But you can't let that confuse you because remember, this is P, okay? So you don't want to confuse these two things because the P is this symbol right here, okay? This is Rho. So you don't want to get those two mixed up. Whenever you see this, when you're reading Greek, you need to get used to pronouncing this as an R sound and not as a P sound. And just keep in mind what the P looks like. Remember it from math, okay? So this is Rho, and that is an R sound in Greek. The next letter is going to be the S sound, which is sigma. And sigma is basically just a circle with a little line sticking out to the right like that. So this letter is sigma. So we have P, Rho, sigma, and then after sigma we have Toph. Now Toph looks like a capital T, but just shrunken down to half size because it's a lowercase letter. So this letter Toph makes the T sound. So these are both pretty easy. Sigma, Toph. And then after Toph, we have the letter Ypsilon. Now Ypsilon looks very similar to an English U. It's a little bit fancier on the edges. But again, this is Ypsilon. And Ypsilon makes an E sound. So keep in mind, so far we've learned 3 letters that all make the same sound in modern Greek. One of them was Ita, makes an E sound, right? Iota makes an E sound. And then also Ypsilon makes an E sound. So it's great. Once you learn these 3 letters, you know that they all make the same sound, E. All right, so it's pretty easy. After Ypsilon, we have the letter Phi. Okay? Now this is one that we don't have in English, but it's basically the F sound or the PH sound. It's just a circle with a line through it coming down. So this letter is Phi. Then after Phi, we have Chi. Okay? And this is basically like the CH in German. If you know how to speak German, the CH is it's a hard breathing. It's like an H, but just a harder H. He. Just move more air, breathe, and say he. It's kind of like a cross between a K and an H. Think about something halfway between a K and an H. He. And the way you make he is sort of like an X, okay? But it kind of goes below the line. You know, so if this were the line, you know, it would kind of go below the line a little bit, okay? So that letter is he. So again, we have Phi, all right? And then we have he, okay? He. So we have Phi, he, and then we have another one that you're probably not going to be used to, which is Psi. Now Psi is pretty much like an Ypsilon with a line coming right down through the middle of it. And Psi is our PS sound, okay? You know, we have a lot of words in English that start with PS, but we usually don't pronounce the P, right? For example, the book of Psalms, we don't call it Psalms, we just call it Psalms. Psychologist, we would not pronounce the P. But in Greek, they do have that PS sound. And this will often be at the beginning of a word in Greek. You know, for example, we say in English someone's psyche. Well, psyche comes from the Greek word psyche. And they do pronounce that PS at the beginning of the word psyche. Okay, so this right here is the psi. And a trick for remembering this one is, if you remember, there's that Greek false god called Poseidon, and he's got that trident in his hand, right? Well, this basically looks a lot like a trident, doesn't it? And so maybe that'll help you. Poseidon is carrying a thing that looks like this, and this is a psi. And then, of course, the last letter is a very famous letter that everyone's heard of, but you may not be very familiar with the symbol of it, though. Even though you've heard it a lot, omega, you probably don't know the symbol. Basically is like a rounded W, okay? So the lowercase omega is like a rounded W. So there you go. That's all the letters.